Huh. So, that was it. That was the next illustrious movie in this illustrious Terminator franchise. Um, this wasn't good. Then again, I wasn't expecting it to be good. Uh, the Terminator series of movies, especially with this one right here, Terminator's starting to become one of those things, much like the Friday the 13th films and Halloween, the Child's Play series, where you kind of wonder, how bad can you continue to make a movie but continue to sell it on its name alone? And that's kind of, that pretty much kind of sums up TerminatorGenisys in general. That pretty much kind of puts a nice button on the a nice bow on top of the box that TerminatorGenisys is. Excuse me. It's when I first saw trailers for this movie months ago, I really wasn't expecting it to be any good. It didn't look good. Nothing about it. It looked like every other modern day action film, just special effects and over elaborate stunts all over the place. It's kind of what you expect to get, and that's kind of pretty much what you get. But just kind of going back to when this movie is first announced, this movie doesn't care about its story anymore. I feel like it's making money off of two things. One, the name itself. The Terminator name means money. And two, Arnold's in it. That's all that matters. We've got Arnold. We've got the name Terminator. It's gonna sell. And this movie didn't care. It seemed to really not respect its source material. Kind of more so banking off of it, given how many callbacks and references the film's just littered with, to an almost embarrassing degree. Family Guy would probably be embarrassed by how often this movie references itself. And that's saying a lot. But I'm going back to the trailer for this, and when this movie first came out, I think I first saw a trailer for it probably during the Winter Classic, the NHL Winter Classic, and it looked pretty repulsive. They've got the lines that you've all heard before. Come with me if you want to live. All of that's there. I'll be back. Yeah, sure. That lets you know it's a Terminator movie because it has all of that in it. And I originally wasn't going to go see it. I had no real desire to see it. And I'll actually be fair. It's not going to be one of those, this is the worst movie ever. Still not the worst movie in the Terminator franchise. That's Terminator 3. That was insulting. This one is bad, but I'd probably go on a limb and say it's probably a more disappointing, lackluster, uninteresting film, and probably one of the worst follow-up movies that I've seen since G.I. Joe Retaliation. Uh, which is actually funny. I'm actually doing this. I'm actually doing this instead of writing about it, instead of just typing it out, because that's how mad this movie made me. I left the theater after watching G.I. Joe Retaliation, and I immediately typed up a review of it. And I went on. I don't even know if I focused more on the movie itself or just bad casting choices. Like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson he just took over the movie, and Adrienne Padalecki, or however you say her name, casting her as Lady J, which made me mad. That was my favorite Joe growing up. But yeah, I pretty much got home immediately, and I'm putting all of this together because if I don't talk about it, I might explode a little bit. I have no intention on really going on forever. I just had a little short list here of a couple of the things in this movie that really stood out. Before going over that, I got to the movie a little bit late. So I missed most of the trailer, so I missed a chance to watch all of the headlining features that are coming up to ensure me that this is going to be another crap year for movies. But just two things. One, glossing over it really quick. I'm sick of the Ant-Man trailer. Absolutely sick of it. Every trailer I see for this movie doesn't look good. Why Ant-Man of all people? I've never been a fan of the character. I'm personally all marveled out. Don't want to see it. Probably not going to see it. Get the trailer off. I can't wait for this movie to come out and get out of the way just so I can stop seeing the stupid trailer for it. And number two was, speaking of tired franchises, Transporter Refueled. Why didn't they just call it Fast and the Furious 8? Because that's exactly what it looked like. That looked unnecessary. It looked noisy. It looked unnecessary. And it kind of symbolizes everything I hate about action movies. But that being out of the way. So, I'm just going to break these things down because I don't want to go on forever with this, because I probably could. First thing that struck me about this movie, not really going back to the trailer again, but the first thing that struck me about this movie was the cast. Alright, we've got Arnold. Fine. He was fine for what he was. Perhaps a little too good at it, because he was the only person who was able to deliver a lot of this bad dialogue with any sense of gravitas. So, this movie focuses on Kyle Reese, who's played by the infinitely untalented Jai Courtney. Jai Courtney is one of the latest models of this trend of incredibly bland, one-note actors who's only good at making one mean, mugging face. That's pretty much his best talent, is looking mean and scary. If you saw him in Divergent as Eric, that's pretty much all he did. He's good at making a mean face, but he's not really good at making a mean face. It's the only thing he can do. And he spends the majority of this movie with one face, and looking like a blithering idiot, and talking like a blithering idiot. Emilia Clarke as Sarah Connor. I might have to look up her age. If I'm casting someone as Sarah Connor, the last thing I needed was someone who looks like they're 15. She looked like a 15-year-old, talked like a 15-year-old, had the facials of a 15-year-old. And 60% of this movie is just her and Kyle just going back and forth at each other and just complaining. And it's the most high-pitched, nasally, whiny dialogue that you never want to hear a character as iconic as Sarah Connor mutter. This is supposed to be 1984. She's talking like a millennial. That pissed me off. I'm not expecting them to, I don't know, try and replicate 80s slang or speech mannerisms or cadence or anything, but there wasn't a second, there wasn't a portion of this movie, not to really get much too in the spoilers here, but they pretty much recreate the scene in the first Terminator movie where the T-800 goes back and he's assaulting the three thugs, and it's almost word for word the exact same scene, up until the other Arnold, the other called Guardian, Sarah calls him Pops in this timeline, and they pretty much play the scene word for word as, "Get me your clothes and your outfit." And they kind of do that all over again, and they tried, I think, as little as possible. I could probably go in my closet and put together an 80s ensemble, or clothes that look like they came out of the 80s, out of the 80s, sorry. These guys didn't look like the 80s. Nothing felt like it was in the 80s. Yeah, sure, they played the Ramones. Ooh, they showed a jukebox and they played the Ramones. That definitely means it's the damn 80s, doesn't it? No, didn't buy it. But I digress. So, yeah, Sarah Connor, along with Sigourney Weavers like Ellen Ripley, is one of the pioneering badass female characters in movies. And Emilia Clarke plays her with absolutely zero toughness. And this is kind of the problem that I have with movies today. It's the same problem I had with the Lady J issue, is that you don't buy them as tough girls. And I'm not just talking about ass kicking, because anybody can kick ass. Anybody can do that. Mila Jovovich has been doing it in 6 Resident Evil movies, and I still don't give a crap about that character. So sure, you can have them kick butt, but they're missing the attitude. And that's the biggest problem. I don't care who you have cast in the part, or I don't care if you have them kicking over a 20-foot Sentinel robot. If you don't portray the attitude of being tough, I'm not going to buy you as tough. Emilia Clarke does not show 1 degree of toughness in this movie whatsoever. None. Couldn't buy it for a second. They found a pretty young lady who's marginally talented, completely out of place in this role, and they put her next to Jai Courtney, who looks like mashed potatoes with eyeballs, because that's probably where his acting degree is. Or, not degree, rather, but that's where his talent level is. And they're just arguing and going back and forth. and it's incredibly annoying. I couldn't wait for one or both of these characters to die. Jason Clarke is John Connor. This one's actually funny in hindsight. I wasn't a fan of Christian Bale's John Connor. Christian Bale, I think, is way too stoic and intense to portray John Connor as human, and kind of show that in Terminator Salvation. I didn't see him as a guy who really cared about fighting the war on humanity. He just kind of looked like a guy, he looked like a gruff, mean guy who just secretly enjoyed blowing things to shreds. Not really someone who's fighting for the survival of humanity. That's not to say that Jason Clarke doesn't do this, but there's a problem with Jason Clarke's John Connor. And it's funny if you've already watched the movie, and I'm trying to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, actually, I think I probably just kind of ruined it a bit there, but he doesn't look like a good guy. You could not make John Connor look any more like a villain if he wore, like, a Bane mask and was stroking an evil cat. He was probably he was one of the few things I actually liked about the movie, because I thought he played the character pretty well. But he didn't look like a good guy. He really didn't. Which is hilarious given the events that play out. But he was he was kind of decent. He kind of looked like what would happen if Matthew Perry and John C. Reilly had a baby. As he's got like these scars on his face, like these like shrapnel marks on his face, and he seriously looks like a Decepticon or something. You could call it like war torn or something, but boy, he looked evil. He was really good, but he looked evil. The other thing I liked about this movie, in terms of the casting, was getting Byung-Hun Lee. I might have butchered that name. Speaking of G.I. Joe Retaliation, he plays Storm Shadow. And he's the T-1000 in this movie. And holy crap, is he awesome at it. He's very good. I thought he was scary. I thought he was kind of imposing. He looked like he could rip you to shreds if he wanted to. And that was probably the part of the movie that I actually enjoyed the most.